Today we are going to talk about the changing attitude of Iraqi Shiites towards Iran. Iraq is witnessing mass protests that are shaking its political establishment to its core. It's almost like a revolution, demand for revolution. Since early October, predominantly Shiite youth took to the streets of Baghdad, Basra and Karbala, calling for their government's resignation and chanting slogans against Iran. While the majority of Iraqis share the same Shiite faith with Iranians, it is precisely in Iraq's Shiite strongholds, like Karbala, where the revolt against Iranian influence has taken root. Open critiques among Iraqi Shiites of the nature and scope of Iran's involvement in Iraq has been unexpected development in the protests of Iraqi youth. In order to understand the scope and nature of the rising anti-Iranian sentiments among the Iraqi Shiites, the Center for Iranian Studies in Ankara has decided to organize this conference. It is a great pleasure today for me to introduce Dr. Munqith Dagher, one of Iraq's most prominent public opinion analysts. Dr. Dagher is the founder of Al-Mustaqilla Research Group and director of the Middle East and North Africa region for Gallup International. Dr. Dagher, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I'm so happy to be with you here this afternoon to discuss one of the most effective events that took place in Iraq during the last, at least for me, for someone who is in my age, for the last 50 years. What is going on right now in Iraq on the popular level is unprecedented. Yes, many people may think that the occupation of Iraq in 2003 was the most important event that happened in Iraq. That's correct, but on the popular side, this can be regarded as the most important things happened to Iraqis during their last half of century. Why is that? What is going on right now, it's not only unthinkable few months ago, it's also now become to be inspiring to all others. And I will discuss this in more deep later on. Many people asked me before about why this revolution took place in Shia's areas. Why Shias? They should be the happiest people in the world. After decades or centuries of frustration in Iraq, eventually they took the power. They controlled the power of one of the most powerful and richest countries in the region. So why they are unhappy? What's going on? Actually, on 2017, I have addressed in one of my presentations in Washington Institute for Near East politics in Washington, I have addressed 3 important changes took place in Iraq. And this is based on my research. Just for your knowledge, I've been doing public opinion surveys in Iraq since 2003. Actually, I and my team conducted the first ever poll in Iraq history. And since that time till now, we have conducted more than 1,000 nationwide survey. We have interviewed around 2 million Iraqis in their households. So we have the richest database which can tell us about Iraqi attitudes and how it changed. On 2017, and after the defeat of Daesh in the Sunnis areas, we have witnessed three main changes, three main shifts in the political situation based on public opinion. The first shift was Sunnis became happier than Kurds and Shias. For the first time since 2003, Sunnis became happier, have more trust in the government than Shias and Kurds. Of course, this has an explanation, a psychological explanation, which I don't want to go with it because I will stick with why in Shia's areas. But I can discuss that later on with anyone. So this was the first shift. The second important shift, which took place, is the conflict shifted from inter-sectarian conflict to intra-sectarian conflict. What does that mean? It means that for the differences between Basra opinion and Shia's opinion is much higher than the difference between the between Anbar opinion and Shia's. I'll give you one striking number. Trust in government. The trust in government. The trust in government in Mosul is higher than in Basra, in the central government. More importantly, the opinion of Anbar people is much close to Shia's trust than Basra in comparison with Shia. So right now, things became to be divided not according to the sectarian affiliation. It's according to the interests of people, which is very good. Why it's very good? Because it moved from the perceptual level. When you have conflict with someone on sectarian level, it is very difficult to reach an agreement point. When you are Sunni and I am Shia, or you are Shia and I am Sunni, and we want to discuss things based on our affiliation, it won't be easy to reach an agreement. But if I have interests and you have some interest, we can sit together on one table to reach an agreement. The trade-off is much easier when it's moved from the perceptual religious level to the practical interest level. This is what's going on right now. Basra, they say that we have different issues. Najaf, they say we have different issues. Mosul, they say we have different issues. Every single one, they don't say that we as Shias have a different issue. They say we as Basrawis have different issue. We as Anbaris, we have different issues. We as Mosul has different issues. So if this is the case, then it's easier. And this is what's happening right now. The conflict inside Shias. Of course, the third main shift was the polarization. Much less polarization towards outside countries. Usually, we had the public opinion divided among also three main opinions. In general, Kurds trust US, Shias trust Iran, Sunnis trust Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and others. 3 years ago, this started to shift. And the trust and the favorability of all countries among Iraqis are going down. So Iraqis now neither trust USA, nor Iran, nor any other country, which is also good. Because when you don't have such polarization, then you can sit with each other without accusing anyone that he is following an agenda, an outside agenda. So these three shifts made me, with many different numbers, made me say more than a year ago that the explosion is coming. And it came. It came. Why it came? Let me show you why it came. This is a socio-political theory in interpreting or in explaining the current popular revolution. One of the most important phenomena studied by socio-political scientists is relative deprivation. What is relative deprivation? Briefly, very briefly, relative deprivation is a psychological mood take place when people feel that what they have in comparison with what they should have is not coming together. There is a gap between what I should have with what I have right now, or with what I had before. Going back to the Iraqi case, in Sunnis areas, why Sunnis are happier? I say that Sunnis are happier because they compare what they have right now with what they had during Daesh. So this made them feel much happier even if their life is not good. When you wake up suddenly from a nightmare what do you feel? You feel very happy. Yes? Even if you didn't pass the exam yesterday, even if you have a big fight with your mom, with your dad, with your wife, but you feel happier because at that moment you just woke up from a nightmare. This is the relative deprivation. What happened in Shia's side is the opposite thing. They compare what they have right now with what they should have, not with what they had, what they should have. Shias, for centuries, waited in Iraq to have their own governments, to have their own states. So they dreamed for centuries about their own government. The justice government, the government that will eventually make them happier, make them equal citizens, make them. So they have very high expectations about the governments. Also, after they fought Daesh, they bleeded a lot. Thousands of Shias, young people, killed. Government before Daesh or during Daesh was telling them that, well, there is a security issue, Daesh there, we cannot do good services for you, we cannot provide jobs, blah, 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 because there are outside threats. After freeing Daesh, after bleeding, after giving blood tax to free Iraq, they had an expectation that the government will return this back to them in good governing, good jobs, good services, but nothing happens. So, the relative deprivation made a gap between what they expected and what they have. And when you have this gap, you feel frustrated. When you feel frustrated, you feel insignificant. You feel that you are marginalized. You are not that good. You feel like nothing. So you had a feeling, deep, strong feeling for significance, the need for significance. And this is why people went to the streets. They want to feel significant. They want to protest to feel significance. The example which I always give to my audience is when you have two children, the youngest one always gets the most attention by the parents, yes? They play with him, they take care of him. The older brother or sister feel jealous. And they will try to do everything in their life to bring your attention, to bring your focus on them. If they don't succeed, they will try to smash things, maybe even smash their brother or their sister. They just want you to take care that we are there. Take care of us. We do exist. If you ignore them more, then you will raise up the challenge for them. This is exactly what is going on. So, the ignorance of the government for the protest for the first few days, they even prevented media to cover the protest. This rose up or increased the challenges among protesters. They made more effort to be seen by the world. One of the most significant messages I received from protesters every day, almost every day, Doctor, why the people are, why the global world ignoring us? I understand this as a need for significance. It's not only a need to be protected, but it's a deep need for significance. They want the world to know that we are there. We are young Iraqis are there. We can change things. We are not marginalized. We are not ignored people. We are a people who can make changes. So the protests came. Let me now, after all this theoretical explanation, I will prove every single step by numbers. Let me show you this. We say that relative deprivation, which means that you are comparing what you have right now with what you should have. What they have right now, Iraqis, they have one of the highest unemployment rates. Unemployment rate among youth is almost 25%. This is, by the way, this is the official number, which we know all that it is less than the reality. But I have, as a researcher, to stick with the official number. Among young women, it's 38%. There are different organizations which estimated the unemployment rate among young with not less than 40%. Actually, in Nasiriyah, in Muthanna, these two governorate, the unemployment rate reached 40%, 38% among young people. In a country which 70% of its population less than 35 years old. Iraq, 70% of the population of Iraq is less than 35 years old. So every single year, we have between 1 to 1.5 million new young Iraqis enter the age of employment, which is 18 years. So we have a big, huge, and the most effective places with unemployment rate in the south. Of course, and Mosul after Daesh. Before Daesh, it was definitely among the south. The poverty. Iraq, with all its wealth, we have 1 out of 3 Iraqis lives under the line of poverty. 1/3 of Iraqis lives under the poverty, according to the International Monetary Fund. According to the World Bank estimations, it's 22.5. The difference between World Bank estimations and International Monetary Fund is the rate, because the rate for International Monetary Fund for the IMF is $3.2 per day. In the World Bank is $2.2 per day. So we have the very high poverty rate. Look to the corruption. This is one of my favorite graphs. We usually ask people about corruption. Corruption is one of the main topics in Iraq, as you know. And this is from 2010. When we ask people, is corruption better or worse now in Iraq? Saying better in blue line, saying worse in red line. So in 2010, we have 23% saying that things are better right now, while 56 saying that things are worse right now. Look to the gap. It's going like this. It's going wider. This is just a week before Daesh took over Mosul. Only 9% saying that it's better. So the difference, which we call it the gap of corruption, was almost 80%, which is almost the same as if you look to this and this. It's almost the same right now before protest took place. Things got better here, 2015, and 2017 became wider, and 2019 wider. This is a standard question which any pollster in the world asks to identify how people feel. From 2010. And why 2010 here? Because it's the year, I think oh, okay. Sorry. Why 2010? Because it's the year when the US forces left Iraq. So during that year, Iraqis, 45% say that we are in the right direction, 45 says that we are in the wrong direction. Then, wrong direction in the red, as you can see it, started to go up, 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 up. The wider was here. Again, this is 7 days before Daesh took over. So the public opinion can recognize that there is something wrong. Then, in 2015, it became here after the fatwa of Jihad al-Kifai, and then we have this on 2017. Right now, the last number I got the last month is we reached 80%. So we came back to the same level. So around 80%. And in Shia's areas, it's 85% of Shias who are saying we are going in the wrong direction. 85%. So, again, reminding you with the theory of relative deprivation, we ask this question: to what extent do you feel that you are treated equally? Look to this huge number. Almost 75% of Iraqis, they feel that they are not treated equally. Human brains usually works in a comparative way. There is a very charming for me say by Marcus when he wanted to explain his theory. Marcus, he said that when you have many houses in one neighborhood, all these houses have equal size. Equal size. Whether that size was big or small doesn't matter, but it has, doesn't matter, sorry. But it has all the same size. People feel happy. If all of a sudden, a new house built, a new palace built beside these houses, immediately people feel that this is unfair. They are unhappy. Though their houses, they were so happy with their houses, and nothing changed in their houses. The new change was a new big house beside them. So they start to compare. This is the mechanism in the human brains. They compare with each other. So that's why this question is important. Whether people feel that they are treated equally or not, as you can see, not at all, 75%. And only 4% say that to a large extent we are treated equally. How often have you felt depressed to the extent that nothing can motivate you? We say that when you feel relative deprivation, what happens is you're depressed. Look to these numbers. This is in 6 months. We asked them during the last 6 months. During the last months, more than 80% of Iraqis, around 83%, they either say that we had it most of the time or sometimes we feel depressed. Very high percentage of Iraqis feeling depressed. To what extent are you satisfied with your life these days? On a scale of 10, the average for Iraqis is 4.4. It didn't reach even 5. So we say that when you feel frustrated, you feel that your life has no meaning, that you have been ignored. So we ask people, look to this huge number of people that there is no meaning for my life. 80%. 80% feel that there is no meaning. Of these 80%, almost 90% are less than 35 years old. So, when we put all these together, usually in the democratic societies, and this, by the way, this is not special with Iraq. I mean, everywhere you can find similar numbers. But what is special about Iraq, in places where you have a solid democracy, usually there are some institutions which we call the societal control institutions. Institutions which has the role of being like valves to minimize the pressure. So, what are these valves? These are, or what are these social control institutions? These are the government, the religious institution, the families. These are the main, judicial system. These are the main control institutions in any society. Let us look to these numbers. A trust in Iraqi government, 20% only. 20% of Iraqis trusting government. And guess what? Among Shias, what's going on? Blue, Shia, red, Sunni, blue, dark, this blue, Shia, this turquoise, Kurds, and the red, Sunnis. Look to the blue one from 2012. Right now, only 15% of Shias. We said in general, it's 20% of Iraqis who trust the government. But among Shia, it's 15%. Lowest. It's the lowest. So the first institution is untrusted. Prime Minister, trust in the Prime Minister. Among Shia, it's only 24%. Of course, among young Shias, it's less. Local government, 29% only. Parliament, 17%. Judiciary system, again, look to the blue one. Only 1 out of 4 Shia trusts the judges. And this is very, very dangerous number. Why? Because judiciary system is the most important control institution in any society, in any modern society. When people have conflicts or appeal against the executive branch or the legislative branch, where do they go? They go to the courts. When you have conflict with others, where do you go? You go to the judge. If you don't trust the judge, then you have to use different other channels. That's why now we have the tribe courts in Iraq, which are important, more important. So anyone who have anything, he will go to his tribe to protect him, not to the judicial system. So the judicial system is not trusted. Religious institution, which is very important, especially among Shias, as you know. Religious institution among Shia has much, much, much higher superiority and importance than Sunnis. Why is that? Why is that? Why it's more important? Because Shias believe in taqlid. They have to follow marja'. In Sunnis, you don't have this thing. The other important difference is Sunnis clerics, and this since Ottoman era, always public employees. They are public employees. They got their salaries from where? From the government. Yes? The clerics, the Sunnis clerics, everywhere in the region, they got their salaries from the government. That's why they are public servants. For Shias, the Shias clerics, they got their salaries from al-Khumus. You know al-khumus, what is the khumus? Yeah? It's the tax, or it's like zakat. It's in a way like zakat. So Shia clerics, for the entire history, they were so close, more close to people than to the governments, because they got their salaries from the people. If the people reject them, they will not pay al-khumus for them. They will pay it to different marja'. So that's why it's important to test a trust in religious institutions. Look to this. On 2014, trust in religious institutions was 80%. 3 months ago, this is 3 months ago, it was 41. It dropped. So Iraqi's trust in religious institutions dropped by more than 40% since 2004. So the religious institution cannot work or cannot do the same control role which it had before. The only trusted institutions in Iraq are army, police, counter-terrorism system, or the what they call it, Jihaz Mukafahat al-Irhab. And for the smartness of the Prime Minister and his crew, instead of taking out one of the corrupted officials from these institutions which we refer to, which untrusted institution, he fired one of the most popular leaders in the CTS, General Sa'idi, just a few days before protest. That was the trigger, the real trigger behind all these protests. Because it's the only, people feel that this is the only institution which we can trust. Yet, you are trying to diminish, you are trying to destroy this institution. Now, the other very important control mechanism or valve is election. We all might be patient if we feel that there is a hope in the future. Yes? Everyone can minimize his anger, his sadness, if he feels that, well, I will finish my studies and get a good job and have better life. So if people have hope, then this can minimize the pressure. And one of these mechanisms is election. As you can see here, in the red line, when we ask people about how fair and free was the last election, the red line, not free and fair. Most people say that it's not fair or free. So people lost faith or trust in the election. Look to this very important one, to that side. Look to those who are saying, we gave them two different sentences, two different statements. One saying that May 2018 elections made me feel that I have a say in how things are run in Iraq. May 2018 elections made me feel that I don't have a say. Remember when I said that when do you feel that you are ignored? You feel that you are ignored then when you feel that you have no say in the future. You have totally ignored. So look to the red lines. Most Iraqis, they feel that the election made them feel that they don't have a say in the future. It means that their opinion is not regarded, is not considered. So, the upcoming provincial election will be free or not free. As you can see, the red line, not free. So they don't have trust in future. That's why the support for trust in the blue lines, the support. Look to the young men. 80% of young men, they support protest. So we say that all ingredients of the explosion was there. That's why it happened. Now let us go to the Iranian role in this protest. Iran really made Iraqis' life, and especially Shias, worse through 3 different things it did. Dumping Iraq with cheap products, dumping Iraq with the drugs, supporting different non-efficient and corrupted governments. I'm from Basra. Yes, Basra used to know as the main producer of tomato in Iraq. It exported tomato not only to Iraq, but also to neighbor countries. We used to have, before 2003, we used to have more than 3,000 big tomato farms on the borders with Kuwait. Right now, we have almost 0 farm. Why is that? Because of one of the reasons, of course, there are a lot of other reasons, but one of the reasons, which is related to what I'm saying here, is that Iran, especially after sanctions, they need US dollars desperately. So they dumped Iraq with very cheap tomato. So farmers in Basra, they shut down their farms because they cannot compete. And this is for many different other industries, small industries, and they cannot compete anymore. Especially that Iran is on the border of the south, near to the, and the transportation fees or cost is very cheap. So people in the south, they feel that Iran is destroying their economy. Second thing is drugs. Iraq known for a long time that it has a 0% drug addiction. That was till 2003. We had 0%. No one. Right now, drugs is one of the main concerns among Iraqis, especially Iraqi women, Iraqi moms, Iraqi mothers in the south. Of course, Iran does not produce, it's not the producer of drugs, but it is a passage. It came from Afghanistan through Iran to Iraq. So, but the public opinion, they see it coming from Iran, regardless of whether it came through officials or smugglers. This is a different story, but for public opinion, they see it as a big problem. Comes to them from Iran. The third thing is supporting different, it's known, and especially for the last government, it is known that Iran is the main player. Iran and USA, I have to say both, but during the last few years, Iran had much higher upper hand in Iraq politics. So people look to Iran as supporting, it is supporting the corrupted, bad government. That's why these things, of course, the current Iranian interference in the suppression of protests rose the level also, especially after the last speech by, or the last statement made by Ayatollah al-Khamenei, who accused the protest as being a negative, and it's conspiracy, and it's to unstabilize the region. So the people had a big reaction. And tell you what, actually this statement made the protesters even more angry. And it raised, or it increased the challenge for them. Because right now, these young 15, 16, 18 years old protesters, they look to themselves as challenging the authority of Ayatollah al-Uzma, Khamenei. So you give them, you make them feel more significant, which is exactly what they need, to feel significant. So let us look to these numbers. This is in the West. I will skip that. Look to these. Very important. We ask this question almost monthly, which is, how do you see the influence of these foreign actors? And we give the people a list of different options, including Iran, including USA. Of course, for USA, Shias in the South always look to the role of the USA as bad role, or negative role, let me say. So only 10% say that it is. Now, this is in August 19, only 8% of Shias regard or consider the US influence as a positive. Look to the Iranian role. It is here. This is in 1 year, or 1 and few months, from March 18 to August 19. In March 18, 50% of Shias say that it has positive role. Iran has positive role. Now it's only 20%, 21%. And I'm sure we will have a new survey. We will have less numbers. So, in general, remember when I started my speech, say that one of the main shifts in Iraq politics is the shift or less polarization toward foreign actors. As you can see here, this is for the total Iraqis, including Shias, Sunnis, and Kurds. Right now, only 15% of Iraqis feel that United States has a positive role, and 11% only of Iraqis feel that Iran has a positive role, which means that for both, of course, this is starting from September 11, it was the first time we see that United States has more influence. It's still very low, but it's more than Iranian influence. And this is a new shift, But both have very low influence among Iraqis. Look to this, interesting. This is only among Shia. Please tell me whether you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the following countries. Iran. Look to 2014. 86% of Shias feel that it is a favorable. The Iranian role is favorable. Now it's 41%. This was 3 months ago. Of course, now it is much less. And among young, it is less even. So among young, only around 1/3 of young people, they think that Iran has a positive influence. Sorry, a favorable, not positive, favorable view. A reliable partner. Do you think that Iran is a reliable partner? When we say partner, it means that all different things, you can put all different things in the, look, 2016, 75, reliable partner. 3 months ago, only 33% reliable partner. Right now, for sure, it's less. And those who are saying that it is, among Sunnis, of course, it was always low. So, this is the summary of the entire story. Sorry for, I took 50 minutes, sorry for that, but I think I'm ready to any question. Sorry again.
Thank you for your insightful, detailed, and comprehensive analysis. As Dr. Dagher noted, we are witnessing a shift in the nature of conflict in Iraq from inter-confessional conflict to intra-confessional conflict. It's obvious that this shift will have geopolitical consequences for our region. He also highlighted the sharp decrease in the public trust in societal institutions, notably Shiite clerical establishment. Moreover, Dr. Dagher stressed Iranian role in the current crisis in Iraq and how Shiite public opinion is changing towards Iran. And now we will take question and answers. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Dagher. I am Deniz Caner. Many questions were crossing my mind, but I will only ask one of them. You explained very well the reasons of the protest, I want to ask, it has also to do with the current situation in Iran, because Iran is now so weak, so that in their story was never so weak. Can also to do, I mean, it has also to do with the current situation in Iran, with its weakness in Iran, as the reason of these protests.
Okay. We will take all questions or one?
One by one. All questions.
All questions.
First and foremost, I would like to say that, again, welcome to our institution, Center for Iranian Studies in Ankara. First of all, I want to introduce myself, and I'm a researcher in the Foreign Policy Desk in the center called Center for Iranian Studies in Ankara. So, as for my question, I want to ask that, I mean, when focusing on the polls you conducted within 5 years, and we see that, I mean, as of 2019, Shias in Iraq are much more frustrated, and they have much more grievances about the Iranian intervention and indifference of the governments. I mean, on the other hand, the ignorance of the government, and at the same time, unemployment and etc. So I want to ask that, how can the people, I mean, these protests eliminate this relative deprivation and ignorance of the governments and the rising Iranian influence in the Iraqi politics? I mean, what are the main demands of the Iraqi people in the 2009 protests? How can we sum up this protest shortly?
Okay.
Any other question?
If nobody has any question, I want to ask my second question. You explained all the dates about the reasons of protest. I think we are enough convinced about it. Do you believe anything can save Iraq from this current situation? We know this. For example, correction is extended in Iraq government everywhere. Not only one person is guilty for that, or second person, 2%. Do you think anything can save Iraq? It is not only for Iraq. In the whole Middle East, we have the same problems.
Okay. The relation between Iran protests and Iraqi protests is not clear right now. And as a researcher, I cannot say or give any opinion without a solid data with me. But my expectation is that Iraqi protest is inspiring for the entire region. And as I put it a few days ago, Iraq is the new Tunisia. Tunis protest was inspiring for the first wave of Arab Spring. I think this wave of Arab Spring will be inspired by Iraq protest. Why is that? Because the level of insistence and the level of suppression by the government is really unprecedented. For days I have tried on the web, on Google and different research engine to find out what is the highest casualties for any protest in the world, ever happened in the world. I didn't find I didn't find a solid event. I found that Tiananmen protest in China on 1989 had, or the authorities, the Chinese authorities, which was, I mean, it was very, very huge protest at that time on 1989. I can remember it very well. Millions, 10 millions of people in Peking, in Tiananmen, went out to protest against the regime. The reports by the official numbers released by the Chinese officials mentioned around 1,000 people between killed and injured. In Iraq right now, we have 315, the last number, official number, the 315 killed, 15,000 injured. So it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, losses in lives in any protest. The insistence of the people, I mean, yes, in Hong Kong, they have been protesting right now for almost 4 months in Hong Kong. But it's only one day in the week they protest. In Iraq, it's continuous right now for around 6 weeks. All other ingredients telling us that this is inspiring, really inspiring a protest. So for sure Iran will be affected. That's for sure. I mean, I cannot just imagine that this has nothing to do with Iran. So this is the relation which I can see here. Also, I remember, I mean, I can recall during 2010, 29, and 28, there was a campaign by Democrats in Washington against Republicans. The core of the campaign was, since Iraqis does not want us, why we are sending our sons to Iraq to be killed? That was a very simple claim by Democrats at that time. So I can imagine right now, if I take the same example, if Iraqis are protesting against our influence in Iraq, so why we should stay in Iraq? Why we should have the influence? Isn't it more important for us to focus on our internal issues? I think this can be, I mean, I'm not sure, but logically I can see it like this. The other question in the what are the things, or is there anything which can save Iraq? The protest itself is a thing which can, because the protest, it showed very important thing. It showed that any sub-identity other than the Iraqi identity cannot work alone. Which means for long times, Sunnis try to adopt Sunnis identity, not Iraqi identity. Shias try to adopt Shia's identity, not Iraqi identity. And Kurds are the same. I think now they came to a conclusion that Iraq cannot work in this way. Cannot work if Shias are separated from Sunnis and from Kurds. the example which I always use is Shias are the engine of change in Iraq. Sunnis are the brakes on change. So it's like a car. The car, if you have a very powerful engine, but the brakes are on, it cannot work. And if you have the best brake in the world, without engine, it cannot work. So this, what will save Iraq? The feeling that they are Iraqis, they are not Shias, not Sunnis, not Kurds. The most difficult part will be the Kurd parts. This is the most difficult thing. Trying to convince the Kurds that they are Iraqis. But there are a very positive signs right now coming from Kurdistan, especially from Suleimania. They are trying to act as Iraqi. They are trying to play as Iraqi, not as a Kurd alone. So I think I'm very optimistic, very optimistic. I have expected this more than a year ago and published an article about it. Things are going in the right direction. This feeling of people, these young people who have challenged this power, they are undefeatable, really undefeatable. I mean, if you follow closely what I'm following in every single province in Iraq, it's amazing. It's an amazing thing. So I think this will save Iraq. About what are the main demands of protesters. Right now, I have my team in all provinces, in all protesting squares and circles, asking people about their, trying to understand. But it's very clear that their main demands are changing the rule of the game. And this is, as we discussed this morning with the professor here, and this is the difference between the Iraq and Syria. Syrians went to or wanted to take out the entire regime, the entire dictator regime, Ba'ath regime. Shias now, with other Iraqis who are protesting with them, they don't want to get a new regime. They want this democracy. Though it is, they criticize it, they want to reform the democracy. They want a new election law, a new commission, a new, independent commission of election. They want to kick out all corrupted parties. They want all things which can make the system function in a better way.
So we can say they want to eliminate also the tacit power sharing system at the same time?
Yes, this is, I mean, when you have this mechanism of changing the law, changing the commission, the independent commission with international supervision on the election, then constitutionally, there is no thing called muhasasa in the constitution. This is a practical way, a practical thing happened as a result of corruption. So they want to take out this corruption. Of course, they want a new constitution. I mean, by new constitution, not entirely new constitution, but changes in the current constitution. This is what they want. But they want to keep the regime as it is.
Any other questions?
I'm Ahmad Zubar. Thank you for your explanation related to the recent protests and negative influence and recent protests in Iraq, and also explain about the negative influence of Iran toward Iraq. I just want to know how the tension between two countries, which have an ideological shift, will affect the economy of two countries, especially Iraq, because now Iraq is the second biggest export dimension to the Iraq, with an amount of $9 billion. How this tension will affect the two country economy, especially Iraqi economy?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the economic side, I think Iraq situation will complicate things for Iran, because as you mentioned that Iraq is the one of the biggest importers of Iran. Iraq does not export anything to Iraq, to Iran. It's only Iran. So, and the expected for 2019, as announced by the government, is to reach economic size of $20 billion. So this is a lot for Iran. And this will make Iran make all efforts in the world to keep its control. But I think the wise policy will be to deal with Iraq as a partner, not as a follower. Both Iran and Iraq can live together and can benefit from each other economically. Both countries can work perfectly right now. Of course, the balance will be always in Iran side, but this does not harm a lot. I mean, having a good relation, good economic relation with Iran will be always good for Iraq. It's not a bad thing. The bad thing is to have Iran priorities over Iraq priorities. This is the issue. But for sure, economy will be one of the most crucial issue, will be one of the most important thing which can complicate the current process which is taking place right now.
I would like to ask the last question.
Yeah.
How people can change the system without having a voice or agent of change within the political elite of Iraq?
Mm-hmm.
Who will be voice of Iraqis inside the government or parliament?
Yeah, this is a big issue. This is a big problem, actually. Right now, the protesters don't trust anyone in the political side. So they don't have a voice inside the political. But they made their voice very clear through protest. I mean, everyone now knows, including Al-Marja'iyya, they knows what these people, they tried with them by providing some jobs. The government announced providing some jobs, providing some services, but it has been refused by protesters. So they know what the people, the biggest problem is how to achieve this, how to turn this to these voices, these demands. How can we transfer it to a practical policies? This is the issue. I think right now the only way which I can see it is to have a third party which can guarantee the process. The UN can play a crucial role here. The UN provided a plan to respond to the demands of the protesters. I think if this plan agreed upon by the Iraqi government and the parliament, and the United Nations will give guarantees, solid guarantees that this plan will be achieved with a very clear timetable, protesters will go back to their homes and go back to their normal life. So the big issue is now trust. The trust, as we saw it. They don't trust anyone. So any promises by the government or by the parliament or by anyone in the Iraqi government that they will do this or that, this will not be enough for protesters. And protesters are tired right now. They want to go back to their homes, but they want to go back with something in their hands. So the best solution right now is to find a third party which can play the role of the umbrella and the guarantee of the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presence. And we will continue such conferences in the future. Thank you.